Hello to whoever is seeing this in the archive. My name is Valerie Farah-Davis. I'm an assistant professor at Arcadia University in English, and I'm joined today by Elaine Maimon, who was a previous professor at Arcadia as well, back when it was called Beaver College. So Elaine Maimon is a giant in rhetoric and composition, specifically one of the founders of the Writing Across the Curriculum or WAC movements and has written extensively on WAC. Most recently, her book on leading academic change is something that we're going to get into today and talk a little bit about. But that book is looking at sort of how it is that we can use WAC, among other strategies, to really change the university and to make it a welcoming place that serves the new majority students, which we're going to talk about a little bit today as well. So thank you, Elaine, for joining us.
Thank you. Delighted to be with you. I love your butterflies on the wallpaper. That's
Oh,
been
thank
one of the
you.
emblems of my life. In fact, on my textbook, a writer's resource, the butterfly motif is all over the cover and for many reasons, connection and metamorphosis.
I love butterflies as well, hence the background. Um, all right, so I'm going to start today with just a sort of a general question. So, in your recent book, Leading Academic Change, you talk about how WAC was transformative in the 1970s. In your view, how is WAC related to the broad category of social justice pedagogy, both in the 1970s and today?
We saw ourselves, a group of us at Beaver College, as very radical thinkers in the 70s. We saw ourselves as reformers, and we still do. The idea then was that higher education was mystified for such a large proportion of the population. Writing across the curriculum, in our view, was a way to demystify higher education and to invite more students into a sense of agency.
Yeah, that's sense of agency is huge. We talk about that a lot in our current EN 101 curriculum at Beaver. Specifically, our program is really focusing on making it being an introduction to anti-racism, accessibility, and queer positive pedagogies. So I'm wondering if how you see WAC interacting with those specific types of pedagogies, anti-racism, accessibility, or queer positive.
The point that we were serving then and always was to help students become independent writers and thinkers, helping students to find their own voice uh, and to see themselves as writers, readers, citizens. And so, in that sense, uh, racism and hatred of any kind is simply not part of the framework because we were teaching students and we weren't trying to teach them any ideology because that's not our role. That it's for the student, to read, to think, to reflect, to write. I used to say to my composition students at Beaver that I hope that at the end of this course, and I think we can do it because we were experimenting with all kinds of new ways of teaching writing. I want you to be able to write a paper that I personally disagree with, but I will have no choice but to give you an A because it's so effectively written.
I love that, the teaching them to just be effective writers and communicators. Um, yeah, so
And to have a voice.
yes.
And the fact that, and to understand the respect for other voices. And, to be able to engage and connect and to listen and, and then again, to develop their own perspective on whatever it is we were studying. And we would do things like showing the various drafts of the Declaration of Independence and the debate, between the founders in terms of what should go in and what should not go in, basically to show that foundational to democracy is, that framework for the exchange of ideas.
And that's the peer review process, right?
Well, yeah, peer review, really peer interaction. And that was absolutely essential to writing course curriculum at Beaver College and at its founding. And I think it has pervaded the pedagogy through 50, 60 years since we first started doing this. And, that idea that you engaged with your peers, you listened to them, you commented, you basically had structured discussions, and yeah, that everybody was a learner. Everyone was able to make that kind of engagement.
The structure of higher education has, well, not the structure, but the type of student we are serving has really changed over the years. So I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about this. You mentioned in Leading Academic Change that we as academics sort of need to transform the academy to serve this new majority student who you speak about and you write about in that book. So who do you see as the new majority student, and why does academia need to transform to serve them?
I think that early on, before the 70s and the various reforms and the open admissions at City University of New York and other really essential historical uh, acts that I wish that everybody thought about and understood the history of. That open admissions at City University of New York was an incredible milestone. And I'm not sure that it's learned about enough. I'm not sure that Mina Shaughnessy's Errors and Expectations is read enough. It was an absolutely key book in the field. The new majority of students, first generation, students of color, adults, and military veterans. These are students who in the past were not considered the college eligible students. The framework before, I would say, the 70s was, really very elitist. And, it was elitist even at places like Arcadia. I remember when I first came to Arcadia, um, being asked to be on an admissions committee and finding out, for example, that and then also on this admissions committee, I found out that until about 5 years before, my joining the faculty, that there was a quota of Jewish students.
Hmm.
And, so this whole idea of quotas was accepted. And, this was something that radically changed in the 70s. And I think that whole idea of, here's how I frame it, that until really the 70s, the colleges and universities were ivy towers or ivy towers for the pun.
Mhm.
And what I've written about, quite extensively is that universities now have to be public squares. The agora, the Greek principle of learning in the public square. I mean, that's again, we're back to Socrates and Plato. I mean, they would walk around in the public square and engage, with citizens, who were, and also it was the place where people were voting and they were talking with each other. And so, very consciously in the 70s, was writing course curriculum, and we were very young and we were very idealistic. And, we were really trying very hard to establish that public square, university as public square concept, which means that you are bringing the community in and you're not doing it in oh, well, aren't you lucky, condescending kind of way. You're doing it because the academy is going to be stronger. And,
Mhm.
everyone of this diverse group of people now being brought into the academy are going to learn from each other.
I was actually just reading some of what you're referencing from your book last night, and I was when you were writing about the public square, I remember you were also writing about it's not just a public square, but it's more of a public garden that everyone must tend to. And I loved this metaphor of it being a public garden because it really brings up this idea that there's a collective responsibility to higher education.
Absolutely. And I've written a lot about really some very strong reasons that higher education improves a society, that makes and lately, we have Lee Bollinger's book, which is I highly recommend, where he talks about higher education as being the fifth pillar of democracy, with the press being the fourth. And of course, the executive, the legislative, and judiciary being the first three. But it's a brilliant book, and he is not just a former college president, university president at Columbia, but he is also a First Amendment scholar. And so it's a book I recommend to everybody to read, and it really expresses what us we used to think of ourselves as young Turks, as a phrase we use. I don't know if it's even appropriate to use anymore, but we thought of ourselves as really doing that work of higher education, and Beaver College at the center of it, as creating a more inclusive society and more inclusive democratic society.
Mhm. And this kind of maybe speaks to one of the last questions I had on this book, Leading Academic Change, which was you talk in the book about needing to pair quality education with equity in education. So I was just kind of curious, you spoke a little bit about these terms, but I'm just kind of curious as to why these particular two terms.
Well, because they're usually in those days, and I think they still are, they were put in opposition,
Hmm.
and that's ridiculous. They are absolutely terms that must be integrated. Quality, which refers to reason, creativity, imagination, on a high and serious level. And equity, where everyone has the opportunity to aspire to that. And all of these things are learnable, teachable. And the idea that these things are put in opposition to each other is dangerous, actually.
I completely agree. It strikes the equity part also speaks to sort of my next question around collaboration, which is so essential in learning. So WAC really could not exist without collaborative work. You say this across your writing, and across all the speeches that you've given, that it's so important and we see that in the archive too that we have of your work from the early days of WAC, from the conversations in the faculty dining room at Beaver College to faculty student collaborations and pedagogy workshops. Collaboration was just so essential to your thinking. Um, and so I'm kind of wondering, how do you think that we continue to build that collaborative spirit in today's academic world where morale is frankly pretty low among faculty, staff, and students for being asked to do so much for so little pay? So in other words, like really, how do we get the academy to really buy into that philosophy of collaboration that was so important to the founding of WAC?
Well, I remember in the early days of the workshops, and faculty members would say, "What do you mean assigning revision and peer review? This is going to be so much more work." And so
Mhm.
our response was, those of us who are leading all of this, we would say, initially, it'll be more work. But what you're expending in physical energy, you're going to be saving in psychic energy. That there's nothing worse than I used to happen to me until I understood better how to teach writing. that, you're grading papers and it's Christmas Eve and it's, oh my God, this student, didn't she hear a word I said? This is completely wrong. And, I do not want to give this student an F, but I'm going to have to. Whereas when you're doing stages of revision and collaboration, all the rest, you have early warning of things that are being miscommunicated. You're able to work on it, deal with it. So that's one factor. But I think the most important thing is that one of the things the writing workshops did at Beaver was, I think it reminded the faculty of what got us hooked on academics in the first place. And what got us hooked in the first place, it was learning. Learning creates energy. Learning is fun. Learning is rejuvenating. And and we used to have a lot of fun in these workshops. And one reason when you talk to Ned Wolf, math professor now close to
Hmm.
retirement, you ask him to tell you about Rosa Ben. I won't go into it now, but
Okay,
uh,
I'll ask him.
we still laugh about it. Uh, it was Rosa Ben, but
Hmm.
we called it Rosa Ben. But in any case, I think that a renewal of writing across the curriculum energy is actually going to help. And it's also the case that well, when we talk about institutional issues and how we do that, writing across the curriculum when it is in full operation actually costs the institution less money. I know this, because I've been in a faculty role, I've been in an administrative role, I've had to balance budgets, I've been at underfunded institutions, my entire life except for Brown, and there are ways that this actually makes more sense. It's the way it's all organized. But my major point is that we faculty members to learning together and learning from each other and learning from students can be some of the most energizing times of the semester. And I'll just make one other political footnote. It always just absolutely baffles me. The far right wing people, they don't seem to get tired. I mean, nothing seems to tire them. They they just are at it, at it, at it in this war against this. And so when I hear, about, I mean, I certainly sympathize, and you're absolutely right. People are doing more with less. It's a, very depressing situation to have the government at war with you, and all of that. But the only way to combat it is by renewal of our own energy.
Hmm. So then I guess I was kind of curious as to sort of some strategies you use to get people to like come out to the workshops and to participate in this collaborative energy boosting thing that you're talking about. So what were some strategies that you used to get people to get to come out?
Well, let me just recall, I just want to put the context right. I was in my 20s. I got my PhD very, very young, and I had absolutely no institutional power. I started at Beaver as an adjunct. The administration made me the writing program administrator while I was still part-time. But I had this sense of mission, which was really driving me. And I just, how do I put this? I mean, I have to look back and I say I was fearless. And I'll just say a little bit about myself and then a little bit about how to motivate these things. I remember um, I had convinced the administration that we needed to limit the composition sections to 20 students. But in those days, it wasn't done by computer, of course. There were sign-up sheets on the desk in the dean's office area, the
Hmm.
registrar dean's office area. And no one was stopping them from making a section go to 35 or whatever. So I went into the office with my scissors, and as soon as a sign-up sheet reached a 20, I just cut it off. And the dean at that time, came out of his office and said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I am defending the reputation of Beaver College as a strong liberal arts college that gives individual attention to students. And that means keeping these sections at 20."
Mhm.
And they stayed at 20.
Yeah, I'll have to thank you for that because they're still at 20. I'm teaching composition this semester, and I had mentioned to my chair, oh, I have a stud. So, like, the student has reached out to me; they want to over tally, and he said, "No, we're not doing that. Keep it at 20. Don't go past."
That's
So
right. And
that's an ethic that
in
has
fact,
stayed.
when I was president and we instituted lower division courses for the first time at Governor's State, we kept those sections at 15.
Hmm.
And the way we did that was to make sure that every full-time faculty member taught composition, and as I used to tell them, joyfully.
Hmm.
And so, if that means, going to conferences or whatever you need to do to make it joyful. But back to how, totally powerless, no institutional authority, uh, brash young woman, as I was, still am, not young, but brash. Uh, but in any case, we did several things. And I'm going to talk about this at Betty's memorial. Betty was an assistant professor, as I was, finally, when I stopped being adjunct in 1975. And, so we formed the first learning community, because I said, Betty, a lot of my students are in your course, because she was extremely popular in her Anthropology 101 course. I said, how about if we share assignments, and the students write drafts, and they get to choose who reads the work in progress and who does the final grade. And so we started doing things like that, and I think we formed the first learning communities. And so we did some structural things that we could do, and that of course made a lot of sense, didn't cost anybody any money, actually saved time and energy. um, and then there were the very fundamental thing about breaking bread together. The idea, well, of course, there was the faculty chat, the dining room where so much happened. What's happened to that? It's silly.
There is a faculty dining room. It's in the dining hall, but it's only really used when it's booked, for an event or something like that. I think most people, they tend to just eat at their desk or go through the day without eating.
A
So,
loss.
hmm.
But in any case, the faculty chat was very important to writing across the curriculum. You talk about something that was non-hierarchical. I mean, you pretty well discovered after a little while that the people who were you had most in common with were eating at one. And so we used to schedule I used to schedule my classes so that I could have lunch at one. And you'd be there, with everyone from an executive vice president to a assistant professor, and you're just talking about things. And
Hmm.
that helped. But then, in terms of the writing workshops themselves, making sure that they were places where people wanted to be. It was kind of like, if you want to be cool, you got to go to this, because things are going to happen there, and if you're not there, you're not going to know about them. And by the way, they bring in really good things to eat, and we always made sure of that. That we always had top of the line refreshments. At any of these workshops, and so there's simple things like that to do, and as I say, and then of course the substance of the workshops themselves, that was important, because everyone was learning things. I mean, it was exciting. I mean, you look at one of the exercises that we did in the workshop was to have various faculty members bring in a paper that they were working on,
Mm.
and to try to explain it to the people around the table. Who That's how Rosa Ben came in. It was Ned's paper on rho sub n, and he was trying to explain that to the rest of us, which was very difficult to do,
Mhm.
but we had a lot of fun with it. So it's those things. It's basically, and of course you have to find a way to pay people for their time, but even before you're able to do that, I think making sure, be there or be square. It was really kind of very much thought of that if you weren't going to these writing workshops, you were out of it.
Mhm.
And then of course having good refreshments, and then making sure essentially that was going on there was interactive, and people weren't being lectured to, wasn't boring, and that you were learning something.
Mhm. That interactive aspect of workshops is so it almost is standard now for a lot of workshops, but from what I've gathered from the way we've initially talked about these over email is that that wasn't standard at all at the time. Is that correct?
Absolutely correct. That one of the great contributions of writing across the curriculum to the whole field of pedagogy and faculty development is that I used to say the workshops were not a postdoctoral seminar, they were not a committee meeting, and they were not a party, but somehow they combined the best features of all three of those things. And that's what they and that but we created them. And so,
Mhm.
and then they've become the standard. But no, I mean, things, in the 70s, things were very lecture oriented, and sage on the stage, and just a very different mode. And it's so hard. I was just thinking, I was participating in something earlier today that was, the point of it was sponsored by a United Faculty Group. Again, this whole war on higher education. It was to help faculty understand the role of boards in the whole issue of freedom of speech and all of that. And I thought, what are they doing? They had this panel of people. It was all lecture, and I just turned it off because, and I thought, well, maybe faculty who don't really know how boards work, they need some of it, but they didn't need as much as this was being done, and
Mhm.
so it's hard to break that pattern, but we did, and as you say, the writing workshop ever since then has been very interactive.
Mhm. And one of the things that was interesting to me about the reading through the workshops in the archives as I was going through them was that the students were invited too. And so I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about why this was so important, bringing students into the what are otherwise exclusionary faculty spaces.
Because we were looking at the whole continuum of life as a writer, and that the students were beginners. We were more experienced, but the whole idea was that continuity, number one. Number two, we very consciously were committed to preparing students, not just to be peer tutors. I mean, I think that yes, that too, but it was really writing fellows.
Hmm.
And we got this idea, from Carleton College. Harriet Sheridan, and she, is a great inspiration for us at Beaver. And I've written about that, and I'm sure you've read about that. But what they did at Carleton was to include students, and then the students were able to participate in classes that they had already taken, and
Mm.
be writing coaches for the students. And so that's what we wanted to do. And so we always included students. And I'll tell you, some of the students have gone on to be English professors, and have really looked back at those days as ways of basically inspiring them to move forward in the field in this way. So that's why we had students there. It was absolutely essential to have students there, and it was another way of breaking down hierarchies.
Right. Of course. And so was some of this work that you were doing with students also some of was this it wasn't just done in the faculty workshops, but also in that the wind course I think that you taught, right? That was writing in its context. Is that correct?
Well, you've got to help me with that one because what's there in the archives? I mean, I remember doing a
Yeah.
winter course with Judy Brodsky, great art professor, called Words and Shapes, where we looked at images and words and poems and paintings and how they interacted. But
Hmm.
tell me about this winter course.
Yeah, so there was something in the archives that was maybe it wasn't called writing in its context. Maybe I've got the title of it wrong. But there was something in the archives that was talking about a winterim course that was run, I believe it was by you, that was focusing on teaching students WAC. That's what it looked like. And it looked like it was sort of as a
Oh,
way
okay,
to
okay,
prepare
okay, okay,
peer
okay, yeah,
tutors as
yeah,
well.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So I think I might have the
That's
name
right.
wrong,
Yeah,
but
yeah. That in addition, you can only have a few students in the faculty workshops.
Mhm.
But the idea was that we needed a whole a larger group of students who could be available, for the various courses that wanted a student, to help with drafts and so forth. And so, yeah, we did a winterim course. I can't remember if I taught it or we had somebody else teaching. I can't remember at the moment, but the idea was to help the students learn how to respond to student writing without doing it for them, without
Mhm.
being their proofreaders or their editors or their co-authors. But how to ask questions about writing, the student's writing, how to get the student again to take agency, in the correction. Yeah, that's right. So we had those, and not only did we have winterim course, but then we ran. Yeah, now it's coming back to me. We ran an advanced composition course at the 200 level, so that more students could take that course for credit and could then and while they were in the course we had them interning in the writing center and then they would be eligible to get paid to do writing center work after they finish the course and also writing fellows work. And let me just say that not only is that pedagogically very strong, but it's very cost effective. I mean, by enlisting undergraduates in this whole process, you're also helping professors, with real work,
Mhm.
because first drafts can be looked at by writing fellows and then overseen by the professor, but it's much less time consuming for the professor, and then you're paying the students, and you're paying them as much as you can pay them in work study or whatever means you have for paying students. So they're earning money, they're getting extremely good skills. We used to tell the students, you don't have to become English professors from this experience, but we do want you to talk to potential employees, how how to work with people reporting to you, and how to look at their writing and not do it for them, but help them to do it themselves. This is a skill that very few people have. You're going to have it, and this is very good for you. So that's what that was all about.
And it's something that has a legacy today. Like in the English department, we're thinking very critically right now as we're preparing for an external review. How do we make our students, how do we prepare our students for the world after college, especially because of how much English as a degree is kind of looked down upon as a lesser degree compared to other more technical degrees. So it's something that we're thinking through still today at Arcadia. Um, and it's interesting that you mentioned that some of your professors, some of your students became English professors. That's the case with one of my mentors, Mark Macbeth.
Oh,
He was a tutor at Arcadia back when it was Beaver, and now he's a professor at CUNY, and he's teaching new students like myself.
yeah, I remember him. But I think it's very important. And of course, as you know from my writing, I'm a great believer in internships.
Mm-hmm.
whether you're doing them on campus, and in a sense, the Writing Fellow program was a form of on-campus internship. And that's why, we could use work study money for it and other things like that. But students in English, absolutely, I mean, every student, no matter what the major, needs to have an internship. And then that's the way, you make the connection between what you're studying in English and future employment. And let me also mention, there's been a lot written lately about the fact that people in technical fields are not getting jobs now, and they're not getting jobs in AI. And in fact, there was just something in Inside Higher Education yesterday about a study that showed that the best preparation jobs in AI is liberal arts. And they're the people who are getting hired, because the thing with AI is the essential function in liberal arts is to ask the right questions. And in AI, understanding how to do that is something that is at the center of liberal arts education. And that's why I got so frustrated with this 4Cs nonsense, because it's something that we should be embracing and really helping students to see, the kind of capabilities they can bring, to the whole, development of artificial intelligence.
Mm-hmm. Um, yeah, one of the things that's is so central, I think, to a liberal education and also WAC, well, because of WAC, is the importance of self-reflection. So moving slightly to a different topic here, but so that is something that really drew me to WAC was the importance of self-reflection. And I've been thinking about this recently because some of my students have been honestly struggling a little bit to see the value in it. And so I was wondering if you would mind explaining a little bit about how you came to realize the importance of self-reflection for those who want to teach and use writing to create social change.
Well, it's kind of baffling to me. How are your students resisting self-reflection? I mean, it goes all the way back to Shakespeare and Know Thyself.
Hmm.
What is their issue with self
I think
with
some of it is they sometimes see it as busy work rather than understanding the value that it actually brings to them in learning how they think, learning how they write. Perhaps I think that they see it too much as busy work.
busy work?
Hmm.
Uh, in any case, I mean, it's essential to learning. Let me just give you some examples. Another Beaver College faculty member who became the first co-author of Writer's Resource, Janice Peretz. She used to give an assignment that I just thought was first rate. She would ask students to write about privately, not to be collected, a personal problem, whatever it was, up to them. And then she would put, on the blackboard, a list of public issues, like inaccessibility of healthcare, the various public policy issues. And then she would say this, she would have the students say, okay, take a look at this list, see if something on this list connects with your personal problem. And if not, let's then you don't have to tell me what you wrote, but just tell me a public policy that might connect. And let's put that on the. So she was, first of all, drawing. The only way I think anybody can learn anything is to connect it, to their personal reflections. It's
Hmm.
otherwise it's all superficial. It's memorization. It's meaningless. And so, I think that that whole notion of reflection, being strategic about it, finding teaching methods that give students those opportunities. And, of course, I guess the other thing I'd have to say is that, again, with the butterflies, it's all about connection. And I should mention that I guess the motto of my whole life is E.M. Forster's Only Connect, from Howard's End. And it was, we have probably in the archives, you'll see posters of a conference that we ran under one of our NEH grants
Mm,
in writing. And our motto was only connect. And I think that with reflection, what you're showing students how to do is to connect the external and the internal.
hmm I love that. I'm gonna have to say that to my students explicitly. Connecting the internal to the external.
Well, just show them. I mean, I think
Yeah.
that this assignment is a great way to do it.
hmm
Just and tell them what you're going to do. Tell them we're going to talk about public policies,
hmm
but first, public policies are meant to solve problems, and everyone has problems.
hmm
I'm going to write too because I've got a problem, and
hmm
it's connected to public policy. Now you do it. And I'm not going to ask you to reveal your private problem, but I am going to ask you to figure out what public policy connects with it. So, I mean,
hmm
it really works. I mean, the students, really see it.
Yeah. We're doing something similar in our next major paper that we have in this composition class, where I'm asking them to write an intervention letter where they basically are choosing an issue that does impact them personally and try to write a letter to someone in a position of power or authority that could potentially have the ability to change that. So we're just starting that unit. I mean, it sounds pretty similar to what your colleague that you
Mhm.
mentioned used to do as well. So I'm hoping they get a lot out of that. We'll see how it goes though. This is the first time I'm teaching this particular assignment.
No, that's good. That's good. I find myself writing to our two Pennsylvania senators nearly every day. I wrote to them yesterday about the SAVE Act and how they had to oppose it. Thank goodness Fetterman is opposing it. You never can be sure what he's going to do, but
hmm
yeah. So that's a good assignment.
Thank you. So yeah, I wanted to move to thinking about Arcadia today, and how we can get WAC to be, um, we'll say people buying into WAC a little bit more at Arcadia again, because it definitely has fallen off a little bit since you left and since the name has changed to Arcadia. And so I was wondering what your thoughts were on how we might get people on board again with WAC at Arcadia.
Well, I think you need to get a group together, and also I think at some point you really need to talk to the president and provost, and just because it's in the interest of the institution in so many ways to have a rejuvenation of WAC. I mean, first of all, the institution will always be seen as a part of its very of a history of higher ed. It's going to be seen as a landmark in terms of higher ed, and wasting that is doesn't make sense.
hmm
And so, I don't know when you go to see that, you have to go through your own hierarchy. Is your chair very supportive?
Oh, definitely, yes.
Okay. How about the dean?
I'd have to talk to her. But we'll see. We're working on some other things, so I have many things that I'm talking to them about as well.
Okay. And then what about the provost and the president? Is it anywhere on their radar that this could be a way to really pull things together?
I'm not sure about the president, the provost potentially, because the provost, we're in a bit of a weird situation at Arcadia right now where the provost is an interim provost while we're doing our search for a new provost. So, and the current provost was the previous dean of the College of Arts and Sciences. So I definitely think he would be receptive to it.
Okay, because I'm just trying to think of, the sequence of Um, now, the person I can send you the name, the person who is organizing the Betty Landman Memorial is in the communications area.
hmm
And this is something that your colleagues in communications and PR and alumni and so forth would really, I think, embrace,
Hmm.
because this is something that is really something special to the institution. I mean, there's so much now all over the place in the press and every place else. And Arcadia Beaver has never really capitalized on this.
Hmm.
And I mean, I think you have to start talking to people. Talk to Ned Wolf, because he was part of the early workshops.
Hmm.
Um, I'm sorry you have a class during Betty's memorial. And as I say, boy, you might consider canceling the class and having your students come, because
Yeah, possibly.
the students need to know the history of their institution. And Betty was the president for a very long time.
Hmm.
And, she was very early on, as I said earlier in our conversation, a very early part when she was a faculty member of instituting writing across the curriculum.
Hmm.
She went to Four Seas with us one year when writing across the curriculum was in its heyday, and basically talked about what Beaver was doing and so forth. So I think you need to talk to Ned. He may suggest other people to talk to.
The Center for Teaching and Learning, I think, also could be a potentially good resource here because they run a very well attended workshop series about once a month. It's called
Oh,
Lunch and Learns.
okay.
And I've run one with them through for on a different topic in the fall. So they might be open to potentially revitalizing through the existing workshops at Arcadia some of this conversation as well.
That's exactly the right approach. Who's the head of that?
It's Monica Day and Ellen Skilton.
Okay, don't know them.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's exactly what you should do. They should be very much at the top of your list, but then enlist them in making this a broader kind of effort, and talk to your chair about. I don't know if you still have a writing fellows program or not,
I
but
don't think we
talk
do.
to your chair about reinstituting this 200 level course in composition where you train writing fellows. So you can do certain things through the department.
Hmm.
So and then I think it wouldn't be a bad idea to talk to people in communications and alumni,
Hmm.
because I think that in terms of connecting this kind of rejuvenation to a very stellar past history would be a good thing. And then at some point, and I don't know what the point is, you want a president or provost task force on writing across the curriculum, where the president and provost, or however it is, appoints across the university people to be on a task force who would work with you on the workshops through the Teaching and Learning Center, through the Writing Fellows, other things, maybe bring Liz in, as a speaker at some point, and do, different things like that. So that would be those would be my suggestions.
Okay, perfect. That's all wonderful starting points. Thank you for that. The other question that I had about so this is a resource question because resources are tight at Arcadia. Um, and we are operating under a very strict budget right now, which is probably the case across many institutions in America following the pandemic. Um, But I guess my question is, how do you mentioned this a little bit about how WAC saves the university money, actually. So I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about how that's true, just so I could like present those arguments to the people in control of the purse strings.
Well, Writing Fellows program saves money,
Hmm.
and saves faculty energy. And it's terrific for students because they learn more about writing themselves by being writing fellows than if they were in any other way. And so instituting something like that, and it's a course, students pay tuition for it, and then you pay them for the work they do out of work study, which is still, unless they completely destroy it, available, and covers, I think, something like 95% of what you pay them. So it's extremely cost-effective program, number one. Number two, it's also cost effective for full-time faculty members to teach composition. Now, this is, and the idea that somehow that got lost is just irritates the heck out of me. Uh, and because so there'll be under-enrolled courses. I always felt bring in an adjunct, bring in a graduate student from Penn to teach an upper division literature course,
Hmm.
in the area that the person is studying, but have your full-time faculty members who are committed to the institution and to the students, to basically cover, the this essential early course, which is going to teach students about critical thinking, is going to teach students everything they need for the rest of their time. So I don't know what openness you have in the department for that, but the other thing to do is when there are open slots in the English department. I know you've got some long-time adjuncts who Joanne tells me have been doing a wonderful job teaching composition. For God's sake, make them full-time and
We've
then
been
save
trying.
instead of hiring somebody who's going to have under-enrolled courses, make the position in composition and rhetoric. And again, that's a way in terms of using your budget. I mean, I told the English department at Governor State they weren't going to get a penny in adjunct money until every full-time faculty member every semester was teaching at least one composition course.
Hmm.
And doing it, as I said, joyfully. Got to figure out these are great courses to teach if you're teaching them the way they should be taught. And I don't even know if Four Cs is a place to send them anymore to learn how to do it. I'm so disillusioned with Four Cs at this moment. But there are ways to help them refurbish their skills,
Hmm.
and teach comedy. So there are ways, there are economies. And then I know that Arcadia at some point was using something like a core curriculum for freshmen. Is that
I
still
do
the case?
believe we have something similar. We have a bunch of different designations that courses get listed under, but I don't know if that's exactly the same as core curriculum.
Well, a core curriculum is where the freshmen have to take, and you can form learning communities through the courses in the core curriculum, but they have to take certain courses during the first 2 years, and there isn't a
Hmm.
whole lot of choice. And what that has several benefits. One is students are exposed to things they might not have chosen to fulfill, the general liberal arts requirements.
Hmm.
It also saves a ton of money because every course, you can organize it so that every course is full, and that every faculty member has a full load. And so
Hmm.
there are things you can do that are both pedagogically sound, but also are going to be uh, good within the budget. And it's funny how many of the things are one and the same thing. I mean, now I think what happens too often is, and one of my presidential colleagues just said publicly, you can't balance a budget through cutting, and that is true.
Hmm.
You have to rethink and reorganize, not cut. And so I think anything that can be done, and I don't know, are you on being on a curriculum committee is a good thing to do
Hmm.
because there are ways to figure out some changes that are going to be beneficial, rather than using, a model of subtraction. You're using a model of multiplication. It can't be addition and subtraction. If that's the
Hmm.
only math you have, you can't balance the budget.
Right.
But if you do a kind of rethinking of how things are doing, then that's how you can do them.
Yeah, I really love that approach. And while we're on the topic of curriculum, I'm curious about what your sort of ideal first year writing curriculum kind of looks like. We recently redesigned ours at Arcadia to be really focused around uh, teaching students to be advocates with their writing and teaching students specifically to advocate for anti-racist work. This was specifically redesigned following the murder of George Floyd to be in line with some of the combating anti-Black racist movements that are happening right now across the country. So back to the original question. What is an ideal writing curriculum look like to you, and how did you really implement that at Beaver?
Well, we developed the comp curriculum in a couple of ways. One was by asking faculty in other departments what would be useful to them in terms of the way, because what we're trying to do is to teach writing for transfer. And
Hmm.
and how do we do that? How do we teach writing in comp so that the student will come into your biology class and be able to understand audience and uh, structure and genre for your class. So you don't necessarily have to teach students how to write a lab report, but you have to maybe help students understand the difference between a lab report and a poem. A lab report about we used to do this whole big thing about baby mice. That's in writing in the arts and sciences. If you looked at that,
Hmm.
about how it's different to do observation and write observation than it is to write a poem about a mouse. Both can be very good, but if you write a poem when you're supposed to be writing an observation, it's not going to fit the bill. And so, there's that kind of multiple context kind of approach. The other thing we did is that the composition program, and this is something that's been somewhat lost in writing course curriculum, and I'm furious about it, but the whole idea was that the composition year was to be the foundation for students then to be able to write in other courses where faculty could depend on their knowing the following: the writing process, the fact that they were going to be writing drafts, and that what that meant, and how you were able to start with something, and maybe your next draft is going to be something very different, but you were going to be doing this in stages. And that meant that we could ask other faculty members to assign papers in stages, because the students would be familiar with it. And so that was very important. The second was learning peer review. And so just basic things like we would show students that the writer would say, what is the main idea in this draft, and then also, where would you like, tell your peer, where would you like help. I mean, if you haven't had much chance to put much effort into it, people aren't going to be able to be that helpful to you. But see what, and then the reviewer would respond to the requests for help, and we would teach students how to do this, and then other professors could depend on it. And then it's also learning how to use a handbook for editing, and that's how I got into actually writing a handbook, which is more than a handbook, but
Hmm.
that would you'd say, okay, now you can learn to do this. You don't have to memorize all the uses of the comma, but there's a place where you can look and see, if you need a comma here, a comma there. And so then, we used to, when I was there and running the writing course and curriculum program, the publisher would give free copies of our freshman handbook to every faculty member at the college, so that they could have it on their desk. and and again, the student's responsible for this. We've taught the student how to use the handbook, and how to edit in the final stages of the paper. So I think that that's basically what the composition course should do.
Thank you for that. I think we do a lot of that already now, but definitely I'm going to return to those points because I'm going to take over the first year writing curriculum
Yeah.
next year. Yeah, I think it's next year that I'm taking. No, 2027, 2028 is the first year I'm taking over. So I'm going to be returning to this interview and thinking back about it as I'm redesigning some of those things. So my final broad question is just, what do you see as the future of WAC work?
Well, I think that Liz Wardle's work, and I think she's articulated something that maybe we were not ready to articulate in the 70s and 80s, and that's the whole concept of thresholds. And I think
Mhm.
that idea is really something that is essential to reforming all of higher education, not just WAC programs. The whole idea that introductory courses help students cross a threshold. They're not going to be experts. They're going to cross a threshold, and they know that they're crossing a threshold. And then, through the rest of their learning career, which means the rest of their life, they're going to be navigating through these new and greater opening landscapes in terms of learning. And I think that's the essence of writing across the curriculum. And I think that Liz and her colleagues have really articulated it so clearly and well as a basic reform of higher ed. And I'll tell you, this is the moment that higher ed as a whole needs to be reformed. And this is the time. I mean, it's a crisis. And, I think that this is a very positive way to do that. And it's a way, that it is a long time coming. And that's where I see not just the future of WAC. I see it as the future of higher education, of undergraduate education.
Mhm.
And I suppose one other thing, I think that I'd like to see again in our profession uh, that writing across the curriculum as the center of composition and rhetoric research and teaching, because I think we now see it as something that isn't just a niche. In fact, when the first edition of a writer's resource, which we were negotiating about that back in 1996, and what we said to the publishers that were interested was that if you want to do this as a niche book, we're not interested. If you want to make this your franchise as your composition text, that's what we're interested in. Because we wanted to use the composition textbook as a way to teach professors how to create this kind of basically crossing the threshold course. We didn't call it that then. That's really what it was all about.
Mhm.
So that's where I see the future. And I
Oh.
think that Arcadia has a moment here. Small liberal arts college with professional connect, liberal arts in the professions and all that. Arcadia has a chance to be in the forefront of all of this and really to
Mhm.
get some real acclaim for it. And I think it's a great opportunity.
Yeah, I mean we see ourselves as a global college, right? Um it's such a perfect pairing to teach students to be global citizens while also in like teaching the tenets of WAC that is trying to do that in a different way, right? Um I think that's the way I'm gonna pitch it to President Ajay.
Yeah. And I think he'll listen. I know that I met him when I first moved back to Philadelphia, where I am not now. I'm sitting here in
Hmm.
Arizona. Uh, but I'm going back to Philadelphia in the next week or so. But when I first met with him, with Barbara, and we talked about the legacy of WAC and all of that, and he was positive about it. And
Hmm.
I really think he'll be open to this.
Hmm.
And I think Betty's memorial, is really is very timely
Hmm.
because it's a real uh, vital connection, past, present, and future.
Yeah, and I mean the this year, I believe, is the 50th anniversary of Whack-A Beaver, right? Or maybe it's
That's
77th?
right. 1977 was the
Hmm.
first NEH grant. So
Yeah.
2020. Oh, that's a very good point. You need to talk to your communications people.
Mm-hmm.
because they should be doing a 2027 50th anniversary. It'll get a lot of attention. And it could get some real big media attention.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'll definitely talk to them about that. I think that that's a brilliant idea. Um, okay, well, thank you so much, Elaine, for making the time for this conversation today. I'm really excited to share this conversation with the folks at Arcadia. I think that it's timely and it's going to land with people. And I just wanted to thank you for the time that you've given us for today.
Well, thank you for reaching out, and I'm really excited that Arcadia Beaver can, have this rejuvenation of writing across the curriculum. So thanks for leading that. And
Thank.
contact me anytime you want. If you have any further questions or comments or reflections, I'm a very reliable emailer. So please do that.
Perfect. Thank you so much.